I'd like to call to order the Police Merit Commission on this date, the April 10th. It's just a little bit beyond 6 o'clock, but the weather has caused that to be a problem. We will all please rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a full commission, and therefore we have a quorum. Anybody on the commission have anything to say?
Not at this time.
Any comments from the commission? Nope. We all have read the minutes from the previous meeting. Anybody want to make a motion to accept?
I motion to accept the
Okay.
meeting, the hearing, sorry, the minutes from last time's meeting.
Thank you, Gail.
I second it.
And Todd seconds it. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Unfinished business, Chief. It shows that the status report on Officer Jonathan Clark's disciplinary case.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Merit Commission. Before I get started, allow me to introduce myself, Chief David Hoffman of the Lawrence Police Department. My attorney to my right, Charles Braun. Other affected individuals in this matter are Officer John Clark, and he is represented by John Kautzman. The purpose of my presentation this evening is to bring to you a settlement agreement that I have reached with Officer Clark and his counsel to levy a 30-day suspension of police powers for Officer Clark in this matter. Any questions that you may have that are beyond what you see before you or inclusive of what you see before you, I'm here to answer at this time.
Okay. We've had a chance to look these over. Are there any comments or questions that arise after you've read the disciplinary settlement agreement?
Mr. President, I have one. On page 4, item number 11, it says this agreement may be altered, amended, or modified only by writing signed by all parties to this agreement. This provision shall be strictly construed. If something like that does occur, is that to be represented back to us for approval of those changes?
It
or-
is. This is simply a recommendation that I am making as the Chief of Police for the Lawrence Police Department with the support and agreement of the officer involved. Ultimately, you will make that decision on what discipline to levy. And as far as this agreement is concerned, it's my understanding that all parties must agree, including yourselves or the Merit Commission at the time, to any changes, which I do not anticipate.
Okay, then I'll put forth the disciplinary settlement agreement as a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, sir.
It has been moved and seconded. All in favor of the agreement as it is written and presented to you, say aye.
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 Those opposed? The agreement settles.
Thank you.
As the presenter of the disciplinary case before you, I just wanted to personally thank you for your time and attention in this matter. And on behalf of Officer Clark, we also appreciate your acceptance and approval and your time. Thank you very much.
Hold up.
Commission,
Amen.
there was a question there.
Yeah, we do have, I have a question. I thought that we were just agreeing this as it was written, but as far
When
as,
you present the agreement, if you agree with the agreement, then it's an aye. Okay, if you want to rescind that, we'll make it another time.
I'll rescind mine.
I rescind mine as well.
Okay. Sarah?
No,
You
I
stand?
agree. I mean,
Charlie?
Call for I vote again. I prefer a hand vote so we can get this squared away.
No vote or a good vote?
I agree with the,
So it's a
petition
3-2,
before
and therefore it's a pass. So the agreement's accepted.
Thank you, sir.
Gail and Todd.
Now, do you want to make a statement or?
Thank you, Mr.
No,
Anderson.
I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, has the agreement been approved?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
It was a 3-2 vote that passed. If there was a question, or we would make statements at this point if you wanted to.
Chief, question for you. Can you please explain to me what discipline matrix was used to determine 30 days?
The existing Lawrence Police Department Merit Commission rules specify that for a violation of this nature on the first offense, the chief is provided guidelines for what I can and can't do, what I should and shouldn't recommend. It's not binding. It just gives me an idea for consistency purposes. That matrix calls for a minimum 11-day suspension, all the way up to and including termination. That was my spectrum of discipline that the existing disciplinary matrix calls for.
But within those boundaries, are the magnitude of the action, does that come into play at all?
It certainly does, which is why I went far in excess of the minimum. I think kind of what you're getting at is, how did I come to my decision?
Yes, 30 days.
So,
Yeah, so I looked at many, many factors involved in this. What we have is a police car being driven by an on-duty police officer responding to a legitimate dispatched run, and quite frankly, he was just driving too fast, in my opinion. That caused a crash which resulted in the death of 2 innocent Lawrence residents. I don't believe for 1 minute that Officer Clark intended, he didn't set out to cause that crash. He had the right of way. Traffic was light, it was sunny, it was dry. There were other contributing factors to the accident which were beyond his control, but at the end of the day, it was his speed that contributed most significantly to this accident. And so once I get beyond that, then I have to look at all the other factors and circumstances regarding what is an appropriate punishment. Now, granted, I'm given guidelines by the disciplinary matrix, which were here long before I was. And I just felt like when I took into consideration, the ultimate question was, is this officer a salvageable police officer in the city of Lawrence? And at the end of my deliberations, I felt very strongly that he was. And some of the reasons for that include the fact that after 15 years with the city of Lawrence and 20 years of overall service, he had not had any violations of this nature whatsoever. He's never been suspended. He's been a stellar police officer in terms of his ability to do his job. He has accepted additional responsibilities. He's the Chief's Honor Guard commander. He's a SWAT team member. He's a canine handler. He's on the busiest shift that we have, and he's a very active police officer. And he does a very good job. Does that excuse the results of this accident? Certainly not. But I have to ask myself, what is the purpose of discipline in policing in general, really in any realm? It is to correct behavior so that it does not occur again. And I stand before you tonight tremendously confident that Officer Clark will never drive outside of the policies and procedures of our department again and the laws of the land. So it was a very difficult decision. It's one that I labored over and lost sleep over. This is a tremendously negative situation all the way around for everybody involved, including some members that are behind me right now who lost loved ones. In addition to my own deliberations and relying on my own experience as a 20-plus year police officer and more than 10 years of that in supervision and executive level management and administration of policing, I reached out to 7 other area chiefs of police. And I won't name the agencies, but you know them all. And they are all cities and universities in the area. and I ran the basic facts and circumstances of this case by them, and I asked for their opinion, what they would find reasonable, given not only the actions, the results, and the officer's background, but the betterment of the community and the betterment of the police department. And I got various answers, and the recommendation before you is consistent with all of the, unanimously, with all of their opinions. So it's not a decision I made in a vacuum. It's not one that I made emotionally or that I made with little forethought. I know that there are going to be consequences far beyond what's listed in this disciplinary agreement for Officer Clark. I know that he has suffered physically and psychologically, certainly not to the extent that the family has, of course, but he was off work for 2.5 months recovering from his injuries, both physically and psychologically. He is restored, and in his time since returning to service in January 30th, he has performed as a police officer in a fine manner. So again, it's a very, very difficult decision, and it's one that I put a lot of thought into, and I stand by it, and hopefully 20 years down the road when I look back on this, I'll stand by it then. But I think as I am here today before you, that this is the most appropriate first-time decision. I will say that the disciplinary matrix for the Lawrence Police Department calls for termination on a second offense within 36 months. That's also taken into consideration.
How do I get a copy of that matrix? Because obviously it was in place before me. I remember the evaluation tool that we all worked on, but the discipline matrix, I don't recall ever seeing that. I would like to have a copy of that.
I'll be happy to provide that.
Thank you. And then also too, Chief, just so that I can make sure that, I represent the residents of Lawrence as best I possibly could, I honestly will have to just speak up and say that I think that the consequences for this officer is definitely disproportionate to what has happened in previous times with other officers. And just to kind of give you a little background, just because I've had some thought about this, we've had officers come in here who've wrecked their cars, 30-day suspension, 8 times 30-day suspension. We've had other officers who've come before this commissioner who called Hispanics wetbacks in Broad Ripple off duty, basically embarrassing the city of Lawrence, and 30-day suspension. So that's my concern as to whether or not this was consistent with an officer. I'm not taking away from his impeccable record. I'm glad for that, and I appreciate all the time that you put into it, but I think I need to put this in the forefront that we probably need to start looking at things a little closer, because it just doesn't set well in the community. And you've done a great job of cleaning up the relationship with our residents in the community by showing all the positive things that our police officers are doing. But this right here is bringing, it sends a message that's just inconsistent, and it makes me question as to whether or not we are afraid to discipline our officers when we have situations like this of this magnitude. So that's the reason why I'm asking for the discipline matrix, because maybe as a commission, we need to look at it.
I'll be happy to provide that.
Thank you.
It calls for
everybody, Chief.
Of course.
Thank you, sir.
You can just send it to me and I'll send it out
Okay.
if you want to. I mean,
Gail, since you were dissent, just anything?
I agree with, the broad, I haven't sat on the commission long, but from what I've seen, like you said, it's, 30 days is like a slap on the wrist, and like what I was getting at is, to what magnitude, like he said, wreck a car, 30 days, calling, off duty and these other things, everything's 30 days. And this is to, you got here and here. So 30 days cannot be for everything. So I just, I'd be interested to see, what it is, your guidelines, what is it that, you go by? Is that all you can do?
Well, I look at a lot
Besides
of-
that and termination.
I look at a lot of different things.
Oh,
Again,
I understand
the salvageableness of the officer
understand.
and his career. I look at intent. I don't know the circumstances surrounding the other cases you all
Understood.
mentioned, but it seems like there may have been some intent there, which there was, obviously there was no overt intention on the part of the officer to do anything except to get to the scene of a police run as quickly as possible. Without going too deep into it, the facts of-
Non-emergency run.
Certainly.
With no
It's-
lights, no sirens, non-emergency for an individual that was already in custody. I don't see the urgency of it for somebody to do a 74 in a 45. I don't see the urgency of that when the suspect is already apprehended and it's in your report.
Nobody sees the urgency in it.
Yeah. Well, I have one other question and I'm done. The 30-day suspension, is that consecutively 30 days? Or is it 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there?
State law calls for 30 working days. Is that what you're asking?
No, because 30 working days can be 2 weeks here, 2 weeks later, or 15 days here, I'm sorry, and 15 days here. Is it 30 consecutive days?
Yes.
I'm asking that for a reason.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the
Yes,
chief?
sir, Mr. President. Chief, I think it can go without saying, but I'm going to say it. This, for not only the families, but for the department, this is absolutely devastating incident. There's no doubt about it. I apologize to my board members if I'm speaking out of turn, but to them, our sincerest apologies for your loss.
Yes.
Very much
But
so.
our duties are to look at this as impartially as possible, separate of emotion, and look at the facts put before us. And what was put before us today was an agreement between you and your counsel, the officers' counsel, and it was put back to us in good faith that this is something that's acceptable. And we needed to look at it on the merits of the way it was given to us, not our personal opinions, not our emotions, just the black and white of what it is. That's a difficult task, just as it was a difficult task for you to tender the paperwork you had to tender. It was a difficult task for us, and as you can tell, I've only been on the board a year, but this is the first time we've ever had conversation like this where we haven't totally been in 100% agreement on something. But the system is what it is. We have limits to what we can do. There's criminal liability that's been assessed already. That's not our responsibility. There's civil liability that's out there. That's being taken care of by another entity. That is not our responsibility. And, you know, for those in the audience, I don't want them to get the opinion that we don't care. Again, I've only been on this board for a year, but the year I've been on here, the people that I've gotten to know up here, I know care a whole lot about this city. They care a whole lot about this agency, and they care a whole lot about the people that preside in it. And this will be something that sits with us for a long time. It is set with us ever since you presented the possibility of these charges at our last meeting. I know it has weighed heavily on everybody's minds. So please don't think that we've taken this lightly. By no means. We've just applied what we've had available to us and ruled upon that accordingly. With that being, I do have to ask, is there EAP programs or something that will continue to avail their services to this officer? Because again, as you stated, this is something that's just as the family's pain and mourning will continue for years and years and years. Even though the officer's cleared and released now, this is a demon that can come back and haunt this officer down the road. Does he have this counseling or this availability available to him as needed if anything should arise?
He does.
Okay. Also, was there any time, I did not read it in the agreement, and I understand this is what it is. This is just my own thought. Prior to this agreement, or is there anything such as remediation of rules and regs and GOs or remediation of training? Was there anything put in place prior to this agreement or still yet to be in place that's not considered discipline but just retraining? Is there anything like that being put forward to reinforce these values and these rules and regs for this officer?
There is. Before Officer Clark was allowed to return to full duty, he went through a emergency vehicle operations course taught by one of our certified EVO instructors. He sat down with our captain of professional standards and reviewed every relevant policy and procedure regarding this incident. Finally, he sat down with the lead investigator who investigated this crash. The officer does not have a distinct memory of the actual crash itself because of his concussion. And that was confirmed to me by physicians and a psychiatrist. So he sat down and he learned exactly what he was doing. He looked at the data from the vehicle data recorder and looked at all of the investigative findings so that he's aware of what happened.
And who was the investigation was conducted by an outside agency?
It was led by LPD Detective Scott Hancock, who leads our fatal crash team. But I also called for the outside oversight of the lead investigator for crash-related matters for IMPD, and the two of them conducted the review and presented it to the prosecutor's office as well.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chief.
It was also reconstructed. We shut down Pendleton Pike essentially, and we reconstructed the crash as well.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chief, thank you very much. This has been tough on you and tough on the community, and to the family of the people who were involved and did make this meeting. Thank you, and we're sorry as a board for the incident that occurred. Chief, I think you've done an outstanding job of representing both the officer and the community to us as the commission. I don't know how to go any further in saying that, but thank you, and thank you for what you've done for the officer also.
I appreciate that, sir, and I agree. This is totally unacceptable. The actions, I do believe this is a reasonable disciplinary recommendation, and I can assure you that everything I have done since becoming chief here has been all about building trust, not eroding it, and I will continue to do that.
I just don't want to see it go to waste because you've done a phenomenal job of cleaning up the perception in the community. When I'm out and about in the community, I hear it.
Well, it's not me, sir. It's the officers and their performance and behaviors, and this is inconsistent with that, but we'll move on in a positive way. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. We have no new business on the agenda. We're showing performance recognition, Chief. Is there anything to that this time, or there is? Okay, you're still back up then.
If I could have Detective Ted Litch and his wife Shelley join me. Just because we experienced what we just did with the negativity of that discipline, I don't want it to override the idea that we still try to highlight officer recognition and performance at each Merit Commission meeting. To do so would be to turn our back on some really good stuff going on in the Lawrence Police Department. So with that said, I'd like to read to you just a narrative of something that happened that I think you should be aware of, and I don't know, maybe pat an officer on the back. On March 26th, Lawrence Police Department officers responded to the Walmart on Pendleton Pike regarding a person who had just been shot. When they arrived, officers located a victim suffering from a gunshot wound to one of his fingers. The agitated victim stated that he had been at the Wendy's restaurant nearby in the drive-through lane. He pulled forward slightly to wait on his order to be completed. Another person behind him in a car who he did not know began to yell at him and started calling him names. This person ultimately drove around the victim and left the scene. The victim became angry about what he had just heard, the comments, and the entire situation. He decided to follow the person to confront him. As the victim pulled up beside this man, he was very surprised to see the man had a gun in his hand and was pointing it at him. The suspect, then fired the weapon, struck the victim in the hand, before driving away at a high rate of speed. Detective Ted Litch was on duty at the time, and he was called to the scene to investigate. With little more than a physical description of the man and of his vehicle, Detective Litch began investigating and later determined that the suspect had paid for his order with a bank card. He was able to determine the suspect's name from that card purchase. One thing led to another, and Detective Litch and other investigators tracked down the suspect, apprehended him, and conducted numerous interviews. During this case, 2 illegal handguns were located and confiscated, and they are being held as evidence. The suspect in this situation provided a confession. However, he claimed the shooting was an accident. Members of the Marion County Prosecutor's Office disagreed and have filed a variety of felony charges against him. Detective Litch's thorough investigation of this somewhat abnormal yet equally violent situation led to a relatively quick outcome in which all parties will be held accountable for their actions. Ted has been a detective for LPD for nearly 5 years after joining the department in 2009. He transferred to LPD after serving as a firefighter with LFD. Ted is a firearms instructor, SWAT team member, and is known for his tenacity and work ethic. Detective Litch is also an officer currently serving in the U.S. Army, after also serving with the U.S. Marine Corps. Seems he can't pick his teams very well. But anyway, he's an asset to the investigations division and to the public safety team in Lawrence overall, and I do thank you for allowing me this time to highlight this incident as a classic example of the work that Ted does every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. You up for comments too, or is that it?
That's it, sir.
Well, I want to thank you for recognizing the officer and also for the way you handled that situation prior. Any citizens comment that wants to come forward? Tom, you a citizen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tom Ashcraft. I am the president of the local union, the FOP 159. I'm also a citizen in Lawrence for over 30 years. I live on Boy Scout Road. A little history to help you out, understand the matrix, understand where this all came from. In 2005 and 2006, we put the Merit Commission in place. It was the Lawrence police officers that wanted the system where we have 5 people to oversee us. We wanted to get rid of the good old boys club to where 2 or 3 people can make a decision and you're out. We formed a decision which gave us 2 people from the police department, 2 people from the mayor's office, and 1 from the city council that will serve on this board for us. It's imperative that this board works together and services this way, because this is what it's all about. We want to see your angles and the whole 9 yards. The matrix system came from the Cincinnati Police Department. It was under federal regulations. We formed that 4 years ago.
About that.
And that is probably one of the strongest matrix you're ever going to see. You can go online, look up Cincinnati PD, and you'll see the matrix system. We have the exact same one, except I'm sure there's a few changes. But we want fair, consistent discipline. And that's why, with the matrix, with this Merit Commission, we feel very strong that you folks are very much part of the community, but you're very much part of the police department to assist us in going forward. And that's why we need your help too. It's a tragedy for the family, and I really do agree. I'm so sorry for you. But, I don't know. I just want everybody to understand that the Merit Commission's in place to work with us, and we're not here to work against anybody. I mean, it's a good system. It's an excellent system designed. But we put it in place, so it wasn't put in place by administrations. And it's a key element here. Our Merit Commission, you can never change it because it's by state statute, which is a big difference. A lot of Merit Commissions are put in by city ordinances. Ours you can't change. So you can't come up one day and say, well, I don't like this, I'm going to change it. Nope, not going to happen unless you get the legislation to change it. Otherwise, so I got to say thank you very much for your service, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Any other citizens comment? We're glad to listen to you. Anybody, family? Okay. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Okay, have a second?
Second?
It's done.